What's up, YouTube? Today we're going to be replacing the air conditioning compressor on a 2006 Chrysler Town and Country. Stay tuned. Alright, so we've got our high side service port right here, right by the air filter box. Then your low side service port is right down here, and that's in a freaking hot zone for sure. So what you want to do is take your caps off, and you want to evacuate the system using an AC machine, or if you do not have an AC machine, you can take it to a place that does have one, and they can hook up their machine and it will evacuate all of the refrigerant out of your system. Then you can move on to the next step. Okay, so the next step is you're going to want to get your vehicle put up onto some ramps, or jack it up, or put it on a lift. Then, I don't believe this is 100% necessary, but I'm going to do it. One, because it's easier to film the job for you guys, but also because I believe it's significantly easier to do this job if this stuff is out of the way. So the first thing we're going to do is remove this plastic cover that the AC information sticker is located on. There is going to be a 10mm bolt and a push rivet on this side and on the other side. And then in between, there's going to be 5 Phillips screws. So I'm going to go ahead and remove all of those now. Alright, and then once you do that, that's going to loosen up this whole front grill area, and you should be able to kind of pull it out from under the grill and then slide it out forward. And unfortunately, I dropped one of my screws down in there, so I'm either going to have to go with one missing or find another one, but unfortunately I do not see it. Alright, and then the next thing we want to do is get a 13mm socket and take all 4 of these off. There's 2 on each side. Then we can take this whole bar and kind of move it to the side, making sure you don't arc out your battery with it. If you got enough slack on your cable, you could even hang it down to the side here. So I did go ahead and pop one of these hood latch cable clips out, and then it's got plenty of space to sit on the ground. And this is my own personal vehicle, so I don't mind one bit that it's leaning against the paint. If you were doing this for a customer car, you may want to take that off completely, but this is just my work van, and if this is just your daily driver and you don't mind, then that'll save you a little bit of time to do that. Now that we're in here, we can go ahead and remove this hose from the top of the fan assembly, and what we're going to basically try to do is pull this whole fan assembly out. Okay, so with your fan out, it should look just like this. If you have an aftermarket one, it might look a little different on the factory one, but it's pretty much the same. You got a connector on both sides. You disconnect those. There should be a bolt on the top and the bottom. I kept mine out because I said screw that. It's easier to get in and out, and I've had to take this thing out several times. It's got a tab that it slides in on the top and bottom, so I just don't really feel that I need those. Also, these rubber bushings here actually go over these, so on my particular setup, the bolts that hold it on at the top are completely pointless and unnecessary. I think part of that is because my radiator might be from a different year or something like that. But anyway, in order to get that fan out, you take those bolts out, you take your upper overflow hose off and kind of set it to the side. And then I would recommend that you take your upper radiator hose off. However, if you can maneuver your radiator a little and stretch this hose over, you should be able to get the ears up and out. Same thing over here. You kind of got to watch out for this AC line because it'll be all up in your way, but it can come out without having to take this hose off and lose a bunch of coolant. And mine's still a little bit hot, so I don't want to take that off right now. Anyway, with this out, look at that. you have all this room to get at the compressor down there. And the main reason I took this off is for the ease of getting to the connections where the lines go into the compressor. You want to make sure that those are seated properly. Otherwise, you're going to have a leak and you're going to have to do this job all over again. So the more space you have and the easier it is to reattach those lines, the better. So what we're going to do now is we're going to go ahead and move down to the bottom for a moment. All right, so this is the bottom. I went ahead and removed the cover. There's one hole here, another small hole there to the left. There is a hole here, and then there's also supposed to be a piece that comes off right here that connects to the fender cover as well, or the wheel well cover rather. And once you pull all of those out, you can get access to the compressor. I pretty much just take this one out. The side one is broken for me, and so I pretty much just pull this one out and then give it a nice yank, a nice pull down. You don't have to be rough with it, but just pull it down, and those two up there will usually pop out pretty easily. And they may or may not break, but you just go ahead and replace them and you'll be good to go. So the next thing we want to do is put a ratchet up here in the tensioner. My tensioner is an aftermarket tensioner, so yours may be a little bit different. Let me turn this light on here for you guys. I believe my tensioner has a square hole on both sides just for ease of access. It's an aftermarket tensioner, but you just find the square hole on yours. If you don't have a square hole, there may be a bolt on the pulley that you can use to move it. But if you've got a 2006 Chrysler Town and Country, it should look very, very similar to this. So the next thing I'm going to do, like I said, is we'll get this belt off. I'm probably going to just take it off of the compressor, and then from there we will start unbolting it. Alright, and then as you guys can see with the ratchet in there, we move it this way, pulls the tensioner down, and it releases it. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and I'm going to use my other hand to slide it off the edge of the compressor, and I'll just kind of tuck it up in there somewhere so it's out of the way. Then after that, we're going to go at this bolt, and then there's another one at the top, I believe, right there. And then there are two more, one here and one right there. But before I take those bolts off, I may actually go to the top and remove the lines so that once the bolts are out, or once the bolts are out, I can just take it out and not have to worry about it hanging from the lines. All right, so back up at the top here, we are going to go ahead and start taking these lines off. Those are going to be a 13 millimeter. Man, that sucker's tight. So I'm going to go ahead and loosen these up and get both your nuts off. There's the bottom one here, and then the top one is right here. And I would just go ahead and loosen them both up and remove them both completely. Alright, and then once you've got them both pretty loose here, you can go ahead and take your nuts off, the top and the bottom. And there's going to be gaskets and O-rings on here that we're going to need to replace. So that's those two. That's the bottom line out. And there's the top. So now we can go ahead and start undoing the bolts here. Another cool thing about having this fan out, so we can get to that top bolt on the inside super easy now. Alright, so I used a 15 millimeter socket and ratchet with a flex head 3/8, and I was able to get all of these bolts loosened. And so now we're just going to go ahead and spin them all off by hand. I may need to crank on them a little bit more, but once that's over with, we should be able to lower down the compressor. So we got all of those bolts out now. The two longer ones, of course, go all the way through that passage there. There's another one up top. And then the front two are sitting on those studs in the AC compressor bracket so it doesn't fall, even with the bolts out. So let me get over here now. And we'll go ahead and pull out the compressor. You want to pull it this way. And be careful not to drop it on your face, but you're going to pull it this way, and then you'll probably lower it down between the oil filter and the lower radiator hose. Got my compressor chilling on the lower radiator hose there right now, because I forgot a very important thing, which is the electrical connector for the clutch. I believe that's for the fan. That's just over here. So the wiring harness goes over here. Here it is, right here. So we want to make sure that we unplug this before we go lowering the compressor down. So I've pushed that tab up there with my thumb, and then we're going to push down on the other tab, and we're going to try to disconnect them. I may need to use both my hands to pull out on this one and pull away from it on this one while squeezing the tabs. Alright, and here's our compressor, fully removed from the vehicle. I was able to just pull it straight out the side of the vehicle this way instead of going between the filter and the hose like I said earlier. So now we're going to grab the new one and start reversing the process. Alright, we got our compressor set up here. The vertical one, or I guess the one that has the two bolts, it just depends on what yours looks like. That's the one you're going to have, or you're going to add your oil. And mine had this little sticker on there that said add oil here. So it says that they come pre-charged with 3 ounces of oil. So I'm going to take their word for it and hope that that's good. And then I'm going to add the other 4.4 ounces through here. I've got it kind of leaned up against this box here, so we can hopefully pour it right in. Just like filling up your engine. Don't know why they wouldn't just fill it up all the way for you, but it's all good. It's probably because they assume you might have a little bit of oil left in the system or something, but if you get everything evacuated out really good, then everything should be alright. And we're going to go ahead and put this cap back on in the meantime so that all that oil stays in there while we're mounting it up. Alright, and then here's the top view. And here's the bottom view. We got that new compressor installed. I just have to tighten the bolts down. And then we will move back up to the top and replace our O-rings and gaskets. Okay, so down in here, we've got our new O-rings and gaskets installed on both lines. And here are the old ones. Contrary to popular belief, it is not recommended to lubricate your O-rings with PAG oil. You're still supposed to use the mineral oil from the R12 systems. However, lubricating them with something is better than lubricating them with nothing, and I don't have any mineral oil, so I just use the PAG oil. The reason why they say not to do that is because it absorbs moisture, and you don't want to attract moisture to your AC system. However, I guarantee you that you'll have way worse problems by putting those seals in dry than putting PAG oil on them. So, now that we've done that, we can go ahead and reinstall these. Okay, now we've got our lines fully installed. When you are pushing these in, you want to make sure that they're fully seated, fully flat against the compressor. You want to have the O-rings lubricated, and you want to wait till you hear a slight click or a slight pop noise to indicate that the connections are fully seated and that the nut can go on all the way almost without having to use your ratchet. You do not want to tighten these up and force the O-ring into the hole. You want to make sure the O-ring is fully seated by hand before you tighten it down. Otherwise, you will likely have a leak. Alright, next thing we want to do now that this is installed is go ahead and turn the crankshaft, or not the crankshaft, but the shaft of the compressor. You want to turn that in the way that it normally spins about 20 times. So I believe that my crankshaft turns clockwise, which means that every other ribbed pulley should also turn clockwise, and then the smooth pulleys will turn counterclockwise. So what we want to do is not on the pulley, not on the outside part, but the inside part. We want to turn this about 20 times. That was 1. That was 2. And then keep doing that till you get to about 20. Then you can go ahead, pull your ratchet, and slide your belt back around the compressor. Alright, then you want to put your undercover back on, or the wheel well cover rather, and give yourself a pat on the back because you are officially done with the most pain in the ass part of the job. We are officially done underneath the vehicle. So the next thing we want to do is go ahead and put our fans back in. Okay, got our fan back in and our overflow hose reconnected, basically reversing the process, watching out for that AC line on this side, watching out for the radiator hose on this side. You can go ahead and put your bolts back in if you have them. Make sure that these posts are in the rubber grommets if you have them, and then we can go ahead and put this piece right here back on. Alright, that's what it looks like after this step. We got all 4 of our 13mm bolts back in. Then you want to go ahead and press your hood clip back in if you took it out. And we'll go ahead and put the plastic back on top now. Alright, and we got her all put back together. Plastic back on. Fortunately, I do have a missing screw now. I never did find it, unfortunately, but that's not a big deal to me. And now that you've gotten to this point, you're probably thinking you're done. Oh no, we're not done yet. Why aren't we done, Andy? That's what you're wanting to know. Well, I'll tell you why we're not done yet. We need to replace the receiver dryer. We need to pull the system into a vacuum, and then we need to recharge it. So let's move on to the next step. Alright, so on this particular vehicle, the receiver dryer is located just behind the air box. It's what your high service or your high side service port is connected to. And I find it's much easier if you go ahead and remove the top part of your air box here. It's even easier if you go ahead and remove the lower part, but since I've replaced this before, I went ahead and left the little circle clamp down here that goes around it. I left that somewhat loose because it is somewhat of a pain in the ass to get this out of here if that clamp has never been removed. So we're going to go ahead and get us an 8mm, and we're going to remove the 2 lines, and with any luck that accumulator or receiver dryer rather should pull right out of there. That's what that looks like with that all removed. You just pop the lines out, slide this out of the hole, and be prepared to fight with it because it does not slide out of that plastic easy. This is pretty much it right here. We're going to throw that piece of crap in the trash, and then here's our new one. New one also has O-rings on every line that goes into it, so there's an O-ring on each of those lines that we disconnected. So I'm going to get my new dryer in place. I may even put just a tad bit of lubricant on the side of it, like some PB Blaster or WD-40, but make sure none of that goes inside. In fact, don't even take the caps off till you get it slid down in place. So we finally got that guy back installed. I must say it was a huge pain in the ass to get the one with the high side port lined up. screwed up the new O-ring, ended up having to reuse my old one, and that's usually a big no-no, but there didn't seem to be anything wrong with it, and it absolutely would not go in with the new one for some reason. So whenever you guys are doing this job, be on the lookout for that you may end up getting a slightly too thick hose with your receiver dryer here. But now that that is installed, we can go ahead and put the system into a vacuum. Alright, so in order to put the system in a vacuum, you're going to need a pair of AC manifold gauges. We've got the low side connected here to the low side. We're going to bring the high side over, and we're going to connect it. Okay. And we're going to take our low side hose here, or not low side, but the one for the vacuum pump. I got that guy down here. I don't know how much slack I got. May have to set this up on something. We'll be right back. I got this guy up here on a cinder block. Go ahead and tighten this by hand as tight as you can. Don't overdo it, trying to use a tool or something. The seals in here should be good enough to tighten by hand. If not, then you probably need a new tool. Most manufacturers recommend at least 30 minutes, but my preference is 45. So we're going to go ahead, put it into a vacuum, and we're going to want to wait till it gets close to that 30 inches of mercury. And we're going to let it sit there for about 45 minutes. I guess I should mention before somebody thinks I'm an idiot, you also want to go ahead and open all of your valves, both of the valves at the gauges, your high side valve, and your low side valve. Otherwise, this is completely pointless. So we're up to just a little over 20. Like I said, we're going to wait about 45 minutes. We're going to let it do its thing. Alright, it's been about 45 minutes and we are still right around 29 inches of mercury, so that indicates there is no leak. Now we'll go ahead and take these gauges and the vacuum pump off, put them away, get our valves all closed up, and then we'll begin to charge the system. Alright, and now that there's no vacuum leaks, went ahead and put the air box back on. I guess I should have kind of gone over that a little bit. There's a flathead screw right here for your hose clamp. This hose just slides right off and it'll rotate 90 degrees over here. You do have a intake air temperature sensor here. You just slide that red tab back, push down on the tab here, and it'll just unplug, plug back in, and do the same thing. And then of course you've got these tabs in here that slide into the lower portion of the box. And then you've got two clamps that hold it on right here and in the front over here. So now that that's reinstalled, I'm going to go ahead and tighten up my clamp, and then we can start to charge our system through the low side port. Now some of you guys may be wondering why I chose not to flush the AC system, and I'll tell you why. You cannot reliably flush the evaporator or the condenser because the passages are too small. Also, it is not advised to flush any hose with a muffler in it. One of my hoses does have a muffler in it. We're replacing the receiver dryer and the compressor, so there would be no need to flush those even if you could flush them. That's also not recommended. So basically a flush isn't going to do anything for me, and I didn't notice any debris or anything in the system. My AC compressor just wasn't really cutting it. It wasn't really working very good. It was working, just not very well. It was seeming like it was on its way out, which is why I'm replacing it. Also, I want to say, not every single time a compressor fails does it just automatically send all this black sludge through your system. That happened with some AC compressors in the past. It was like a Ford thing, I think. And then, you know, since that happened, everybody just thinks every time your compressor fails that all of a sudden your you know, your system is filled with shrapnel and all this other stuff. That's garbage. I don't really go for that. Now, obviously that can happen, and you want to absolutely make sure that your AC system is clean. However, just because the compressor failed does not mean that your system is full of sludge or anything like that. So with all of that being said, I've chosen not to flush the system, and we're going to go ahead and move on with the recharge. All right, so now we're going to go ahead and start up the vehicle. We're going to turn our AC on full blast manual mode. So we got it on low, we got it on the highest fan speed. I don't know if recirculate really matters, but I know that it blows a little harder on recirculate, so I'm just going to go ahead and do that. And another thing, you can go ahead and fill the system with your AC manifold gauges, but I prefer to just fill the system with the old standard hose that screws onto a can. It's just a little easier for me. So we're going to go ahead and connect this onto the low side service port. We've got our AC on, and this particular one has maybe 3 ounces left in it. So I'm going to put about 2/3 of what's left in this can, plus all of those cans, and that should equal the 38 ounces that we need in our system. In theory, or in best practice rather, what we should be doing is using a scale to actually weigh all of these before and after, but I do not have a scale, and I think these cans are pretty close to the amount that we're going to need. And there is, of course, some allowed variance up or down. There's usually not a lot, but there is some. So I think with the way we're doing it, we should end up just fine. Alright, so we're on our second can now, and I want to take this opportunity to mention that it's a good idea to remember to actually plug your compressor as well as your fans back in. So I got a little ahead of myself and forgot to plug those in, and just now realized that. So definitely do plug those back in. We're going to continue to fill it up till we got 38 ounces. Almost all finished up with my AC. I got these guys over here doing a misfire diagnostic. We got the Late Night Auto Shop over here on the Andy's Auto YouTube channel. And what do you know? It's another Chrysler Town and Country Dodge Grand Caravan vehicle. Got a cylinder 3 misfire.
Everybody gotta love them.
Doing some spark tests, baby. Alright, back to the reason you're here. We still have it on full speed, lowest temperature setting, and I know you can't feel through a video, but it is blowing nice and cold. Right now, before at idle, it would be hot. Right now, it would be basically the outside temperature air, and that is significantly better than it was. So now, I'm going to go ahead and put her in reverse. We'll back off of the ramps here. Make sure I'm not hitting nothing. And we are all finished up. That's going to be the end of our AC compressor replacement video on the 2006 Chrysler Town and Country. If you have something to say, leave a comment below. If you learned something, leave a like. If you want to learn some more, subscribe to the channel. Otherwise, I'll see you next time.